And welcome, everyone. We are live. Welcome to another OSR tabletop with myself, DM Bloodworth, Richard, if you prefer. And welcome to another live stream. This is my second live stream using Restream. So really happy to be back using a streaming service that is actually affordable and actually does give me quite a number of features that are just as useful as before, and even increases some of the features that I'm able to use. So really happy about that. Happy about the transition from StreamYards to this, and I hope that you're enjoying it as well. Another thing that I kind of noticed between the last time that I used this, which was the first live stream, and this, previous live streams, was that my sound output, my audio output from the mic seemed to be much louder. So that hopefully is preferable for you as well. So so I have a potentially controversial statement to make with this video or live stream, and that is, why is the OSR seemingly controversy free? And what I mean by that is that the way that I look at it and the way that I kind of see it is that whatever controversies surround the OSR or indie games seem to be generated from the outside looking in at it. All right. So they don't seem that the publishing companies or the developers of these OSR and indie games don't seem to step on themselves and create controversies surrounding their product or their marketing methods that you see with Wizards of the Coast, for example. And I'm actually, very apropos to this live stream. I do have a video that's a short video from someone many of you probably know of, and he kind of, stepped in on this topic, very topic, but of course he took it from the exact opposite and I believe wrong interpretation of the situation. But I will get to that. I won't bury that lead for too long. I do want to open up this discussion, with the viewers, and so I am going to put in the chat the link for you to join the chat if you wish to. You'll come into the backstage, and I know how to actually see that this time around, so there'll be less of a delay for you to come in if you wish and talk about this topic. But as I was setting this up and as I was talking about this in various other places, like on Facebook, I had responded to a comment that was talking about limitations of the Flame Princess, and I chimed in and said, this very point. I was saying that, most of the controversies surrounding the OSR are ones that come from people that are outside of the OSR, kind of looking in. and for the purposes of attacking it, but they're not attacking it based on the game system or based on the way that the system was marketed. Instead, they're attacking the personalities of the individuals that they don't like for whatever other reasons. Often political, but other times just a tribal, a tribal argument that they are making or attempting to make, and then they try to drag the product through the mud, over that. And for the purposes of setting up for this, I grabbed my copy of Lamentations of the Princess here, and as I'm flipping through it, I'm like, well, let me see, what exactly could be controversial. And something really unique about this, if you've never looked at this before, this goes right in from the table of contents, and it goes directly to character creation. It does not mention any kind of an introductory of this is what a role-playing game is, or these are the intentions of playing a role-playing game, or anything along those lines. It jumps right into game mechanics. It jumps right into, and at no point is there anywhere in this small tiny book anything that relates to something that is metagamed, that is outside of actually playing this game. And that's something that I've argued before as well, was that the OSR and in many cases the indie gaming industry, they focus on making the best game that they can, or just good games, and then running and playing them, and that's their sole focus. So that's another thing that I wanted to bring up, because sometime in 2023 or so on Twitter, because Twitter seems to be the, I don't go to Reddit enough to actually get a sense, but I know Reddit is a cesspool of controversy and drama and everything as well. But I do go to X or Twitter a lot more often. And when I saw last year's, at some point, the um, the creator of Amazing Adventures, Jason Vey, who works for Trollord Games, and he's a great game designer. Jason Vey is a great game designer, and Trollord Games is a phenomenal game publisher. The publisher primarily of Castles and Crusades and some other side games such as Amazing Adventures. And so Jason Vey, who is went out on Twitter and made some kind of a political comment, and he was getting into arguments with the people, commenting on his comment, or going back and forth, and Trollord Games came out and they said, and I'm assuming that was either Stephen Chenault or possibly David Chenault, most likely Stephen, came out and said, listen, Trollord Games is about gaming. We're about making good games where we don't talk politics, where we don't care about politics. We just care about good gaming. And of course, now Jason Vey came back and apologized and said he wasn't speaking for Trollord Games, absolutely, and he's so so glad to be with them and such. But Trollord Games started getting flack for having an apolitical position when it comes to gaming. They were like, no, we're just here to create good games and to run and play good games. And I myself have been attacked for having and blocked by various people for having that exact same view. I don't care about what your identity, your social identity, or your identity construct, whatever you are choosing to believe in. You just, I just care about, are you at my table looking to play a game and to get along with the other people sitting at the table, and to just play. And so I have been attacked for that, for that position. I watched Trollord Games be attacked for being apolitical. I've seen that the common people that are, opposed to the OSR or opposed to just apolitical theory, coming in and saying, "Well, identity isn't political." If you're against someone's identity politics, then you're against them as existing, and just sheer ridiculousness of that statement and argument is the reason why we try to, whether it's the OSR or the indie gaming, we don't even like to call it a community. We just play these kinds of games. It's our preference. But we don't like to engage in that. So we do try to insulate ourselves from that kind of a thing. So I'm going to get to some of the comments here, and good to see these people coming in. And so Ajax, hey, how's it going? Good to see you too. The only time I see controversy is between two OSR YouTubers dissing one another, but it's rare. And they're usually not arguing over the game system itself. They might be arguing over the way to play something, and what they feel is the best way of playing. So sometimes you'll see this, and rest in peace, Sean Schoner Driscoll, for oftentimes being one of those individuals that would come out and say, well, you're not really role playing if you're doing this. But those are arguments not about the game system. Those are arguments not about the marketing of a particular game system. Those are arguments about how we engage in the craft. I will call it a craft. How we engage in the craft of tabletop role playing. So yeah, and it's often not a controversy that is even coming from within. A lot of times, the controversies are just attacks from outsiders looking in. Let's go to the next. So, Neemar Cowbell, hey, how's it going? Marketing towards different group marketing, making buying decisions. Mothers buy WotC gaming books for kids and Gen Z. OSR games are aimed at older male adults, or just older adults, because I know a lot of females that do play old school, and independent game systems. You look at Masquerade the Vampire. You look at those kinds of things, and I look at a lot of cyberpunk. I see a lot of women playing cyberpunk as well. Yeah, it's much more diverse than it used to be, perhaps, and that is and that's going to actually point to the fact that as different groups of people are engaging in the hobby in the modern era, and they start looking at older game systems, you're going to see some of that crossover to a certain extent. So yes, it certainly is, as our gaming population starts getting older, they are going to start looking outside of, I believe, the mainstream. All right, and I'll use Wizards of the Coast 5e for example. I think several years ago they were talking about, and they had mentioned it. They mentioned it in some interviews and such, that the demographic drop off for 5e was that there were fewer and fewer people playing 5e uh, post age 25, and post age like 35, it was like next to nothing. I mean, just literally dropping out of it. Now, of course, there's going to be some exceptions, but that near nothing is like less than 5%, let's say, and so though, and those tend to be like the people that are we see more visible, so they have a much larger voice than their population would lend themselves to. But that's a demographic shift that we're really talking about, and not really a controversial type of thing. So again, I get back to the argument of just saying that the game systems themselves are not really generating the controversies that you'll see in the more mainstream game systems, where systematically they're creating issues. All right. And again, I'm going to jump right to the video and share this video. It is from J. Scott Garibay, and I know that I don't know that he didn't see my upcoming video and chime in on this or not. I kind of doubt that, but it's always possible. But it does go right to what I'm talking about here, just from the opposite direction, of that belief. So I'm going to switch views here, and I am going to share the screen on that. And I hope you can hear this. Let me know, because it's the first time I'm showing another video within this, and just let me know how this works.
So, what is the most important thing happening in the proximity of Dungeons and Dragons today? Well, it is specifically Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons goes through scandal about every month to every 3 months. So once a month to once a quarter, right? Once a season, once a month to once a season. Magic the Gathering is having a scandal right now. So the Commander Rules Committee banned 4 specific cards. 3 of them were over $100, and people got very upset. But what's happening now is Magic is just cruising right through it. Demand is high, and even the cards are rebounding in price. So what's interesting is so Magic the Gathering is really best understood, in my humble opinion, as the Dungeons and Dragons collectible card game. Anything attached to Dungeons and Dragons, it has Teflon for scandals. It can move right through them. Whereas competitors, OSR and indies, they can't even achieve scandal. Nobody cares enough about them to give them a scandal.
All right, so there you have his his argument was that OSR and indies don't have scandal because nobody cares enough about them. Totally missing the point that he's pointing out a scandal that Wizards of the Coast created for itself. All right, and I put the comment in there, and I'm going to read off my comment that I put on Scott's video, even though he has me blocked and he won't be able to see me. You can at least see that at some point, if he ever does unblock me just to see, he'll see probably about hundreds of comments that I've put on his videos. So I said, the OSR and the indies avoid scandal by focusing on making good games and running and playing them. WotC gets dragged down by its scandals because they focus on monetizing and controlling their product post-sale and trying to control the way people play it. So I think that is the main reason why Wizards of the Coast keeps on ending up in these scandals, is because they keep on focusing on monetization. They don't do enough. They don't do enough play testing, whether it be internally or externally. And this is a perfect example of that. I mean, so if they had to remove 4 cards from their organized play, all right, their official play, that tells me that they did not play test enough with those 4 cards to see what a disaster they were at the gaming table, that so bad that they actually had to pull them from official gameplay. The other thing that, Wizards of the Coast do not care about the value of a card post initial sale. All right. They don't care one bit whether they tank the market to where the secondary market of their products is 1 cent, or if it's $16,000, for that one card. It makes no difference to Wizards of the Coast one way or the other, because they make no money from the secondary market. And it probably pisses them off that they don't get a piece of that secondary market. And to the point that, and I'll stop sharing, I'll switch over here now, to the point that by doing digital sales, they are effectively they are effectively causing you to be a renter of their product, not a purchaser of their product. And they have full control over that product once you are renting it. They can alter it without your knowledge or permission. They can remove it without your permission, and you have no guarantee that the product you bought today will be the product that you have by tomorrow morning, or whether or not you have it at all. And that is the real issue here. And that's the kind of controversy that is created by their own marketing schemes. So again, you have just encapsulated in that one video, you have two issues that are self-inflicted. You have WotC's marketing that causes the problem, and WotC's lack of play testing that is creating cards in Magic the Gathering, or character classes in Dungeons and Dragons 5e that are broken and either virtually unplayable, or they will break the game system that you are trying to run. And so J. Scott Garibay was kind of, trying to make it where, the lack of scandal is an actual positive, is a negative. All right. And that having scandals is, well, you wouldn't have scandals if nobody cared about your game. It's just such a bizarre way of looking at it, because it is the exact opposite of the case. Games and games publishers that focus on making good games and playing and running games don't have controversies, because the people are engaging them in the way that they were intended to. They're playing them as games. They're playing them to have a good time with friends, and they are not worrying about the marketing of it post sale, or the or controlling it post sale as well. Let me get caught up with the comments here. Thanks for that. I'm glad that it did sound fine. Flint, how's it going? Good evening. Need more cowbell. So OSRs are niche market. Being a niche market, consumers are going to be more homogenous. That might be so, but isn't there a type of 5e player? I mean, aren't they semi-homogenous as well? Is it, I think you can make that argument that that they are niche as well. The whole listen, the whole hobby is niche, but we have niches within the niche. All right, so but they're homogenous. The 5e player base is homogenous to a certain extent. Just as you could argue that the OSR is um, is not it's not monolithic. So you can't argue that the OSR is monolithic. Being a niche market is going to be more homogeneous. No, I mean, let me get the two terms right. So heterogeneous means that it's all one thing, and the argument is often made that the OSR is heterogeneous, which I think is not exactly true. Or you could make the argument that 5e is more heterogeneous than homogeneous because they have a certain type that you see more so. So you have both things going on, and you could make the argument either way. Sorry about that. I flipped the two terms in my head as well. How's it going, Mac? All right, so let's see. Only Gygax era TSR had a real gaming culture where things actually got tested by the decision makers. Video games are facing the same problem. Yeah. And you're right. Only Gygax era TSR, because I just went through that with covering one of the splat books for AD&D second edition that was not very well tested out. And that was one of the arguments that I saw in the commentary on my, on my short and on my video this morning, was that there wasn't a whole lot of play testing going on with those splat books in the second edition, which is why you had such a hit or miss quality-wise of the materials that were found in it. We're not talking about the writing quality. We're just talking about the usefulness and whether or not it worked well within the system. Yes, WotC does not care about the secondary market. If they did, they'd be buying up their own rare cards the way luxury good makers buy up old stock. Yes. Or at least, trying to manipulate that as well. Cal, hey, how's it going, Cal? And remember, anybody who wants to jump in on this, you're welcome to jump in. I will put the link in again. So if you do want to join the chat, you can come on in. So it costs money to properly test. Why do it when you have controversy and still sell product? But have they been selling product? I mean, we just had this series of videos going on for like the last 2 weeks by very large YouTube channels and everything, talking about, well, their sales numbers are actually not all that impressive, certainly for their hardcovers, not very impressive at all. And most of their sales are for digital, and digital, as I argue, is you're not buying it, you're renting it. They can alter it and or remove it or do whatever they want with it after that sale. So and they can control the way that you're playing it by just saying, this is how we're going to change this thing now, and you can no longer play it that way. And we're seeing that with the Magic the Gathering cards, right? They're basically saying you cannot use these 4 cards at a table, at an officially run table now, and that, at least initially, was going to severely depress the value of those. All right, we have someone looking to come in, so I will need more cowbell. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, how you doing?
Let me switch views here so we're evened out. Good to see you. How's it going?
Not bad. I mean, beautiful day here on the West Coast.
Very nice. So what do you want to comment in on?
I think Vince Venturella, who has a YouTube channel that covers mostly Age of Sigmar, but it was designed for WotC and Dungeons and Dragons, had an excellent series on game design and what WotC tries to do. It's actually 3 different groups that they appeal to, and they design every Magic card for one of these groups. OSR doesn't do that. OSR is very much a player-centric view where it's a lot of player skill that's involved in playing these OSR games.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is one particular viewpoint. So in a sense, particularly because a lot of these players have grown up during the era when that particular play style was dominant, they tend to be more homogeneous than a wider selection in a mass market game such as Magic the Gathering or 5th edition. That's just the way it is. And the more homogeneous that group is, the less controversy you're going to have within that group. But you're going to have more controversy with the outside groups. That's just how in-group, out-group dynamics works.
Yeah. I'll certainly look into that. So Vince Venturella.
Yep.
So, and do you know offhand like the name of his? Unless it's his name.
Let me see. Let me do a quick search.
And in the meantime, let me just jump because Cal made a comment here. So controversy and imperfect product can still be a winner. The consumerism is strong. Yes, and that's true. I mean, look at how well World of Warcraft did, even though for the first like 3 days it was completely unplayable. It was probably one of the worst MMO launches I had ever experienced, and that was back during a time where I was exclusively playing and play testing, beta testing, alpha testing, MMOs. And World of Warcraft had an atrocious launch, and yet it became the most, the largest and most influential of the MMOs. And I'll tell you the real reason behind that was because you could still play World of Warcraft on like one of the earliest generations of Windows, and you could still play it on a 286 megahertz PC, like a Pentium 2. You could run it on a Pentium 2 at the time when they were, computers were 5 years ahead of that. And they did not change that model for years, that you could still run classic, what's called classic World of Warcraft now on a computer that's older than the player using it. So, that was their marketing scheme. So they never had the best game product out there. They just had one that you had the easiest access to it, because you did not need a computer less than 10 years old to run it. It's kind of like the McDonald's hamburger analogy that I often make. No one beats selling the regular McDonald's hamburger, but that's not the best hamburger on the market by far. So yeah, the imperfection product is outweighed by access, familiarity, and just not really caring too much about quality over that access and whatnot. Marketing testing is underrated discipline. Good market testing is hard to do. Yes, and I'm sure that it is. The homogeneity in USR and OSR is almost all, or all depending on the definition of OSR, is reskin D&D. And I agree with that to a certain extent, although I push back often on that. OSR's definition is just reskin D&D. Again, I consider Traveler to be an old school role-playing game. I consider, any of those like GURPS 2nd edition or TSR's Marvel Superheroes as an OSR game. Villains and Vigilantes, first or second edition are OSR games. I can hit every genre and say this is an OSR game, and they don't have to be even built on the chassis of old school D&D. They can be totally different game systems. They're just older, and that's where I take old school from, is the actual definition of what old school is based on the age of the product. So let's see. So now I'm getting caught up and everything. So Cal wrote, I don't buy or play any video games. I'm aware of the news lately. I play devil's advocate here. Yeah, and I get it, and that's a perfect role to play. So I really appreciate that, when you're pointing out some of the differences that we might have in what we're looking at. So yes, absolutely. So it does seem to me that the OSR is fairly insular, if not homogenous community. Yeah, it's, or at least we try for it to be somewhat insular, because we're protecting it, or trying to protect it. Yes, we are gatekeeping it from those that would come in to look to make it something that it's not, or make it something different, or or attack it just simply because it is. I did a video probably close to 2 years ago where I was pointing out a Twitter exchange that I had where someone was lamenting the fact that they tried to infiltrate the OSR and basically, virtually claimed that their purpose was to destroy it from within, and yet there was no central authority within the OSR. It wasn't a true community that could be corrupted and changed and whatnot. It was too fragmented to actually dismantle it from within. And the person was literally lamenting that fact, that there was no head to cut off, and so that was the insular nature of it, was that it's protected by not having a head. It's protected by not being a community, and the fact that this individual, and I'm sure others, was lamenting that issue because because it did protect it, and then they started claiming that in itself is gatekeeping, which is kind of silly, because it's like, no, it's just saying that we're going to focus on playing games and running games and having fun while doing so, and we don't care about these other issues. It's escapism, and I hate that idea that it's escapism. That's not what they look at it as far as being something they want to participate in. So Dice Tales, hey, how's it going? Yeah, not willing to buy a $600 video card to be able to play the current games at a decent frame rate, not to mention that there aren't too many that have any engaging plot, as far as I can tell. Yeah, and yes, and the quality of the story of video games, particularly the ones that we might want to engage in, whether it be some kind of an RPG, so whether it's a solo game or a massively multiplayer online game, the engagement factor of them is kind of cooked into the calculus that people are willing to grind for. They're willing to grind for gaining power. It's power gaming. It's power gaming. Strictly speaking, and that power gaming mentality has crossed over into the tabletop role-playing game space, particularly with 5e and other games where your character's action economy is so based on feature sets that you might pick and choose along the way, and that's why it's a very it's a very mishmash of different character class features or even racial features that you can now combine up, and it's all min-maxing. It's all a throw. It's all a tip of the hat to the MMO mentality of character builds. When you see somebody, in my opinion, when you see somebody talk about, well, this is my character build, they're bringing into it a video game mentality and not a role-playing mentality to their character. And that's not exclusive to Dungeons and Dragons. That's found in any game system that focuses quite a lot on that idea of character power curve. So let's continue on. I want to get caught up to some of these. Yes, yeah, you're playing the character sheet. Absolutely, you're not role playing. OSR promotes role play more so than games that are built on character sheets, games with high levels of action economy and that kind of thing. So you can argue that the more simple a system, so a rules light system promotes role playing. Again, my argument, the more simple the system is, the more that it is that it promotes that. Yeah, take it easy, Mike. Thanks for stopping in. So let's see what else we have here. D&D, the Denny's of our, no, Denny's is higher quality. It is the McDonald's of RPGs, and just the base form McDonald's hamburgers of RPGs, with small fries at the medium price, small fries at the medium price, and watered down soda drinks. Yep. So let's see. Hey, Mercurius, once again, thank you for the membership giving out. And the person receiving the membership was Scott Baker, I believe. So, Scott, welcome aboard. Yep, you received the game membership, which if you're online and you see that, you can go into my Discord and I will assign you that role, and that will open you up to jumping in on any of my current games or upcoming games if you wish to do so. So that is one of the membership perks that you get, is that I am looking to start a Fallout RPG group that will be running from 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern time on a weekdays, probably Thursday or Friday. So I know it's kind of an odd time, like most people are working or whatever, and they can't make that. But if you're in the European time zone or one even further out, that might actually become a time slot that is available to you. And so I certainly welcome you to do so. But then I have regular timed games, during the prime time, Eastern time, during the week as well. So let's see. Again, what is your definition of OSR? Just that alone can cause fights. Yeah, and I guess it can be, but having more definitions of it does make it more expansive. It increases the size of the umbrella. So that alone, I don't see as a negative. So I have. Old school is old school for me, so that doesn't really change. Is it revival, is it Renaissance, or is it role playing or rules? I make a differentiation in the R and not in the OS. The only thing that I say that might be controversial with the OS is that I consider any game 30 years or older to be old school. All right, so some game system, like the next game system that is kind of shifting towards being truly old school to me, is AD&D Second Edition. Soon, Third Edition will be old school, and any other games outside of that. So, I know Troll Lord Games, so that came out in Castles and Crusades was done in 2023, and 2003. So sorry, 2003, 2004. So at this point, it is only 20 years old. Or actually, they claim 25 years old. So I would give it another 5 years or more before we can start calling it. So by 2030, it will be old school. And now others say that it's one of the earliest versions of OSR because it came directly out of the OGL, of the time frame, and it is certainly derivative of Dungeons and Dragons. And as a matter of fact, Gary Gygax actually, worked with Stephen and David Chenault in creating it, and whether he was just a consultant or whatnot, or he was involved with it. James Ward was involved with portions of it as well. So you can't separate it from from its D&D roots. Castles and Crusades comes directly from Gary Gygax's campaign, his home campaign. Yes, it is a derivative of D&D, but it's not the only example of OSR that is derivative.
Is there really a point to arguing about what the definition of OSR is? It strikes me as two drunk uncles having an argument at a backyard barbecue. I mean, it's entertaining, but is there a point to it?
I think the point of it, I think, is to make it as ambiguous as possible. To make because I think if you narrow it down to just being one definition, that will expose it for attack. That will make it more of a monolithic thing that can now be attacked from outsiders looking in on it. So,
but does anyone really believe there's a hard line there? No. So what are we really arguing
about? Well, I do see that some people do argue that it is that it only applies to D&D derivative games. So I do see that. Now, are they super vocal about it and constantly railing on that issue and everything? No. No one in the OSR really cares too much about that. We're focused on, well, I shouldn't say no one, few focus on that. We're focused on playing games and running games and having a good time.
Right. And that goes to my two drunk uncle analogy.
Yeah.
It's exactly what it is. It's like, okay, yeah, you wanna have an argument about it, go right ahead. Doesn't mean anything.
I think people on the outside of it care more about the definition than people on the inside of it.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think this has ever come up in like a gaming group. Well, how dare you? I mean,
no, it doesn't. Not even at conventions. Which is not your own gaming group. It's gaming groups that kind of come together. Yeah. I never encounter this discussion on at a gaming table, whether it's my own gaming table or a gaming table that is a temporary thing at a convention. This is exclusive to internet conversations.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's making an event out of absolutely nothing.
Right, which is why I say that controversies don't really don't seemingly get spawned by the OSR themselves. They're always something that is on the outside of, the outside of it, and then looking in. And I really do make the argument that it's never about the game system of an OSR or an independent game system. The only time I see controversies around indie games, and again, this is just my own anecdotal. Others will have different ways of seeing it, but it's pronouns on the character sheet is the only time I see controversies really coming out of an indie game, and then just the few things that like Modifius was doing with trying to change some of the quote unquote culturally insensitive words like martial arts, exotic, and mysterious. Don't get me going on how ridiculous that is, but it's part of the reason why they actually lost over that issue. They lost two of their senior lore consultants with Conan 2D20, because they were like, this is silly. We're not going to get into this minutia of word games over, whether martial arts is socially, and culturally insensitive. It's insanity, and the fact that but then I look at other Modifius, content that has come out since then, and for instance, I mentioned earlier, and I'm, was going to talk about, Fallout 3 on their character sheet, they don't have a pronouns block at all. So sometimes they use it, sometimes they don't. In their newest upcoming Discworld, they have pronouns again on the pre-gen. So they don't even seem to be very consistent with it as well. So it's kind of weird why they get into that. But that's the only kind of inclusion in the game mechanics. And that's not even a game mechanic, really. But that's the only place where you see in print something that is controversial, potentially controversial, that people will argue over. And but like what I showed with Lamentations of the Flame Princess, he just talks about damn rules. There's not even any kind of a setup, or there's no forward in it. It's just rule all the way through. So it's weird. It really is weird. And like you said, and I certainly agree too, is that this is something that people just talk about to talk about. Yeah, we are insolent. Yes. I thought I said insular, but insolent is fine too. And insolvent, thanks to RPG war game. Yes, we cannot be dissolved. We cannot be wiped out. Dungeons and Dragons will live forever, regardless of what WotC does to it, because we still have our old editions behind us, or at our table or whatever, that we can always revert back to, and we have our other old school games that we can play along the way. So the hobby will not crumble with the collapse of Wizards of the Coast or Dungeons and Dragons 5e or whatever going forward. You're a rich wording dragon. Yes.
Has anyone ever figured out what dragons spend their money on?
No, or even why. I mean, there's a couple of Lord of the Rings YouTube channels that really go into like the lore of it and everything, and why they hoard treasures or look into them. But I don't think that even Tolkien really mentions it. And if any place he would have mentioned it in the Silmarillions. I don't know if it's mentioned in there, why they hoard.
Yeah, it makes no sense.
And it's all dragons too, like in the D&D sense. It's the good ones, good dragons as well will hoard treasure, and they will They will violently protect their treasure as well. It is, and people will argue about punk, and people will argue what is punk and what isn't. No, so it's it served its purpose as a starting place for gamers for a certain taste to develop games or play certain types of games. It's jettisoned booster. Today, it's jettisoned booster rockets. I don't know, because that's like saying that it served its purpose and now it's done. And I think that it's going to continue going forward. And I've always argued that what is considered OSR is going to change with each passing decade. And I always use the driving on a Sunday morning, listening to an AM radio station, and listening to the morning oldies, and Guns N' Roses started playing on it. And I was like, oh my God. I mean, if this is the morning oldies, I really do feel old. Now I'm 57, 57 years old. So I'm like, this is from, my high school years, and that's considered the morning oldies. Now, when I was a teenager, the morning oldies was music from, the 50s and early 60s. So that's what tells me that OSR is going to continue going forward, and it will continue to incorporate younger and younger game systems as they start becoming 30 plus years old. One day 5e is going to be OSR, just by the nature of that alone. So let's see. Let's see. Howdy, folks. Hey, Kentucky Rex. How's it going? Yeah, I guess so. I guess it could be like two segments of the same religion arguing with each other. Any two sects of a religion arguing, which one is the proper way of playing it. And that's, a lot of times that's where people, I think, fall into these controversies, but their player or their commentator generated controversies. That's where they're arguing over what is the right way to play. And no one is ever going to agree with what is the right way to play. But if that's the only argument that is taking place within the OSR, let's say, that has nothing to do with game quality or gaming. In essence, it's about player behavior. And they will never be able to control how people play games. And Wizards of the Coast, may be trying to do that, but they'll never be able to do it. They might try to do that by removing cards from play, from official play, or saying this cannot be used at in Adventures League or anything like that. And what's going to happen is people are going to just stop playing Adventures League and stop playing official play, and they're going to use the cards that they want at their own table. They're not going to care about that thing. They will, all that Wizards of the Coast would do is separate itself from the player base. The player base will start ignoring them altogether and say, I really don't need you to do this. I'm sure that there are probably hundreds of cards that have been eliminated from official play, and yet people still play them or play with them.
Stop making me feel old, chat.
Let's see. So let me get caught up. Sorry. So TCC, there's a new name. Hey, how's it going? They have pronouns on character sheets in COC Carterstead. Bummed out. Yeah, you can just ignore them. Again, I don't see that as much of a I don't see them as much of a game rule modification. Um, but it is kind of a bummer to see that they're going to focus on that kind of nonsense because it's sheer virtual signaling and pandering. And anytime you start doing that, then you might fall into the the sinkhole of letting that bleed over into your product development and everything, and that's when a game system becomes shit and no one wants to play it anymore.
I've got a sort of a theory about that.
Go ahead.
My theory is that being the headquarters being in Seattle, and being from the West Coast, I think in a very polarized world, the people at WotC, not only is there an element that subscribes to very West Coast liberal viewpoints about things, but I think there's also an element of, which crazies are going to show up at my house, and particularly in Seattle, it's a thing.
Yeah.
And so, and you'll never know because they'll never tell you. But that's got to be in the back of people's minds that have been there a few years, that remembers the period of 2018, 2019, when Seattle was really having some violent riots.
Yeah.
I don't want these people showing up at my house. So let's tone everything down.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's why I have very simple rules for sitting at my table. All right, and my rule number one is that when you have decided that my table is the right table for you to sit at, you know what my game is, you know what my rules are for running the game itself, whether I have homebrew or not. You'll know what basic I use I use like the movie rating kind of thing. I run basically a PG-13 game. I don't care. I make it a little bit harsher in like Call of Cthulhu or something like that. A horror game, I might be a little bit stronger than that, but never certain aspects of R that you might see. Um, you know, um, there's never anything hypersexual in it at all. Just there to play a PG-13 style game, and that's fine. And I only run it for adults too. So it's like if you're not capable of handling PG-13 level material as an adult, then you're not able to handle a tabletop role-playing game, in my opinion. And come back when you're feeling better, kind of thing. It's like but you're also there to play. You're there to play the game system, the rules, and and the tone that I'm looking to do at the table, and then that you're going to get along well with others. Now, certain things, like if you're going there and you're going to be hyper sensitive about pronouns, let's say, I kind of adopt the mentality that a lot of HR companies are doing, and they're basically discarding anyone who's using pronouns that are going to be difficult to tiptoe around in the workplace. And to have that at your gaming table, I look at it in a very much the same way. If everyone needs to tiptoe around how they're talking, even if not even directly towards you, but how they're talking amongst themselves as well, then you're not playing well with others. I like to use the elementary the elementary school comment that used to be on report cards, where they'd say plays well with others. That was like one of the greatest praises you could have, on your elementary report card. Or does not play well with others is probably one of the worst ones. It was an indicator that you are going to be, I'll use their term, problematic at the table.
Well, I think it goes beyond that too. It's when the vitriol that's online decides to show up at your front door at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, yeah, that's you know, that's the other, you know, thing. Like I've never seen, I've never experienced a major disruption at my gaming table. Now my gaming tables are either at conventions or online. All right, so yeah, no one has been playing in my house for 40 years, you know, since I was a kid. So but I've never encountered this kind of a thing at a convention, you know, and again, that's playing with, you know, almost complete strangers. And there's no I've not encountered major disruptions on you know, online. I mean, in my own group, I've probably had about 3 players in the last 8 years that were difficult to get them acclimated with the rest of the party. You know, they were very difficult in that sense, and those were more spotlight players, if you know what I mean by that. It's like they always wanted to be the
Sure.
focus,
Yeah.
you know, of it, and that's to the fullest extent that they, you know, that I've come across. So if that's the worst I've ever had to deal with, then, you know, I think that's been pretty lucky for the most part. But I'm sure others have had really negative experience, and others might have never had an you know, negative experience at all. It is. Uh, yes, the dragons are secretly trying to maintain the proper economy. They're a deflationary factor in the economy. How's it going, off grid? Make sure you on Discord. Make sure you chime in on the Fallout time frame if that's good for you. Yeah, just let me know like when's good times for you to play, because I'm willing to do split session. I would really love to get something during the mornings, like 12 to 3 on Thursday or Friday, because I'm wide open during those times. I feel like I lose, you know, every weekday morning, um, you know, of game time that I could be utilizing for game times, just by not putting it out there. Who can join when? So anyway, and that's the same for everybody else here on chat. If you're available in the mornings, you know, Eastern time, I can game almost any day, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern time, and on Thursdays and Fridays from 12 to 3 as well. So if anyone's ever looking to game at any time, if you want me to run something, or even small groups of people, or even solo, I'll run solo RPGs for people as well. You know, solo being DM plus one kind of thing. Ready to do that as well. Only certain systems that works well with, like Call of Cthulhu or something along those lines. Probably, maybe even Fallout. But I think Fallout will be better with 3 to 4 players. So let's see, Kentucky Rex. All right. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a very religious person. I don't know too much about religious and, you know, analogies. So um, at this point, MTG players should just print out cards and play with friends. The product is not worth it. Yeah, I mean, and they do have proxy cards out there. So I've heard of, you know, that is a thing that you can play with proxy cards. I like to see OSR advocates bring OSR books into local chain bookstore RPG sections and put OSR SCs on the shelf with free written on the the UPC on the back and plant seeds. Yeah, or just run your games there. Just run OSR games there. Just sit there at the table with an OSR game or an indie game. It doesn't have to be old school. It could be something. Sit there with Conan 2D20. You will get players to sit down and play that game. That game is a phenomenal game to play. Fallout looks like it's going to be a lot of fun to play as well. Anything from Savage Worlds, you will get players. Deadlands is hugely popular at conventions as well. Blade Runner is hugely popular at conventions. Probably really play well at a gaming store also. And that's designed for 4 players. So it's designed for a fairly small group as well. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of places I wouldn't want to visit. New York City being one of them is a tough place to visit now too.
Wait a minute.
What's that?
I love Brooklyn.
It's as a New Yorker, and I work in the Bronx. The subways are a freaking nightmare, and unless you're downtown, like around around Broadway and that kind of thing. But you go off those streets and you're in a hellscape. So Brooklyn, I'm sure that there's just by like Court Street might be okay. I doubt it though. Yeah, there's not too many places in Brooklyn that are safe.
I don't know. I've spent a lot of time in Prospect Park. I love that area.
How long ago was that?
Oh, that was really on the edge of when it was being gentrified.
Yeah. So you're talking about pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a totally different. Going anytime beyond Bloomberg, and I couldn't stand him as a mayor, but going beyond Bloomberg, it's a totally different city. De Blasio and Adams have destroyed the city.
Well, he's going to jail anyway.
Yeah, I know. But that doesn't mean his replacement is going to not keep it going down the tubes. So let's see. Anyway, I see we're talking politics instead of that. Hey, Mac, go enjoy your Star Trek. I don't know what Star Trek you're looking to see. I hear Strange New Worlds is not that bad, actually. I don't know if that's the current Star Trek series. I have a feeling it is, unless you're talking about Star Trek Fleet Command, which I do play once in a while. So let's see. So that's pretty much it that I was looking to focus on, was just, a general sense of, to me, it's seemingly devoid of controversy based on game mechanics, based on marketing, based on the publisher saying how the game should be played or how the games can be played in the future. Like what we see with like MTG taking away those cards from official play. And to me, the best response to that, and I think someone also kind of mentioned it as well, but can't post messages to some channels, learn more. I don't know what that meant. Seems to me that, the best response to a gaming company saying that you can no longer use this product, in official play, is to not engage in official play and just run the game as you wish. Remove their power that they somehow believe they have over you in that you don't care what they consider to be official play. You know, you don't care what anyone, you should never care what anyone says is the right way to play at your own table. The right way to play at your own table is what works for you and your players. If you're all having fun, that's the right way to play, and the rules are written, um, that pretty much say, that. Now, whether or not you want to, take it like the OSR does, where they say, well, if you change too much, you're no longer playing the game. So what? So what if you're no longer playing the game? So what if you've changed the rules so dramatically that it is no longer Dungeons and Dragons the way that Gary Gygax had written it? You're looking to run the game at your table, for your players. And again, it comes back to, if you're all having fun, it's a success. That's the only win condition that there is in any tabletop role playing game, is everyone having fun. I don't know. I always thought Fiats were kind of crappy cars, but I've never actually driven one, so I should go along that lines. Yes, the GM drives a foreign sensible car. But anyway, I'm looking at some of the comments. So need more cowbell.
Yep.
What is a current game system that you are running or playing now?
I just wrapped up Swords and Wizardry campaign that ran for 9 months. I like the system, but I like the system for like modules and short campaigns. I have never been able to make a gold as XP system work well for any length of time. I mean, just warps incentives. It what I spend my money on. Well, let me spend my money on hirelings and have 16 hirelings, and so that you got 4 people tapping out in front of you with a 10-foot pole. Well, traps are meaningless. I've got 4 thieves trying to pick a lock, and 4 guys trying to find a secret door. It just the system just breaks down because the economy is so bad, and so I tend to go back. I'm originally a Warhammer Fantasy player. I got into the hobby that way, and I've looked at that. I'm starting to write my own system that's more high fantasy, but it's based on like Moonstone or Malfo, where it's your characters are more than a stat block, and the difference between that, let's say, in your character creation, you get a +2 for strength in the typical OSR game or Dungeons and Dragons game, and in a more character-driven game, you get an ability called "You're Drunk, Go Home," in which case all your stats change when you've been drinking. Now, to me, that means more as a character in the way you play a character than just, well, you got a +1 sword. Good on you, man. And so I'm sort of drifting in that direction, starting to explore what that looks like. And I picked up a copy of Imperium Maledictum that I'm going to look at. So there's, I mean, in a way, there are dead ends in OSR, and they're different. On your recommendation, I actually picked up a copy of Castles and Crusades, Player's Handbook. So looking at that. But there are definite limitations to what OSR can do.
Yeah, I mean it's and I've actually been struggling with the same thing. Like I ran So in the time that I've returned to tabletop role-playing games since 2015, I ran Mifrog for I'd say for about 8 months, and that was one straight campaign. So I ran it about 8 months, and during that time, it actually shifted to several different different printings, let's say, or editions, if you want to call it that. And and then I did some like little one shots here and there, or very very short little like mini campaigns with some of those new editions of it. So overall, I probably ran it for little over a year. Then I ran D&D Beck Me, and I ran that for about 8 months with one group of players, and basically went from levels 1 through 5-ish, somewhere around there, and then that dropped off, and ran another D&D another D&D Beck Me campaign that lasted about 4 months, 5 months, and then stopped. Then I ran AD&D First Edition for 2 years and roughly 3 months. So that was a long, and those players are still with me as well. So that was a long campaign, running from levels 1 through about 11 or so the Druids certainly got to 11. And the others were kind of lagging, a little bit behind, just because of the thing. And like you said, the treasure thing kind of became the only way that they could really gain up levels a lot. And you will see that with Castles and Crusades as well. Even though Castles and Crusades is a much more streamlined system. But I found myself longing, like my Castles and Crusades now is in its 35th week. So whatever number of months that works out to, close to 8 months, I guess, or seven and change. Actually, 7 months and a little over 7 months, whatever. I'm not doing my math right now. And I can see what you're talking about. Like, I'm looking for shorter campaigns, even with the same players. I'm looking for different systems, that I want to get into. I've run some side systems along the way as well, like Call of Cthulhu for a couple of sessions. I'm running Shadow Dark. We're around like session 12 or so of Shadow Dark. But yeah, I'm definitely looking at doing shorter, different system campaigns, running it for, maybe 6 to 8 weeks and then moving on to something else, go along those kinds of lines. Maybe like with Axe, I'm supposed to get Axe to Adventure Conqueror King.
Yeah.
And starting those player characters out at level 5 or so, which is considered like the adventurer stage of it. So even though you could start them at first level if you want to, the whole system seems to be really geared towards that domain kind of play. So if you are going to start them young, let's say you're going to start them at like level 5, and so you're kind of starting them off at a fairly decent, power level there. That it's going to just change the dynamic of what you're looking to do. And I don't know how that system works as far as the monetary / XP economy that takes place. But I definitely see your point that it's kind of like, what do we spend our money on? Kind of an issue if you're not doing the expense of leveling up as a monetary drain, because that's huge in AD&D First Edition.
Yeah, you're essentially fixing the economy by stealing your money back from the players, but they know it. I mean that creates friction in the game. I was very curious that you mentioned like Call of Cthulhu. How do you make horror work in a game? Maybe I just don't have the skill to do it. I've always looked at these games as, well, that's an interesting idea, I just don't know how to get that feeling of horror, like when you watch a horror movie in the theater where everybody like jumps when
Well,
the
no,
guy
you're not
comes
going
out
to
the
get the
door.
jump scares because there's
Yeah,
nothing, there's nothing. You get this, you get the fear, let's say, in the character's frailty. So I, from a very young age, we started playing in my group probably Call of Cthulhu second edition. So that's around like 83. So we would have been about 14, 15 years old when we first started playing Call of Cthulhu. And and the we our expectation was your character is going to die, your character is going to go insane, your character is going to run away and look over his or her shoulder for the rest of their lives, and probably at some date get tracked down and die anyway. So it was just a sense of, when is my character going to fail in this mission, in this quest, in this adventure, whatever. And how much is my character going to learn about the eldritch horror before he dies? Because that became the only win condition, was how much can I learn before I'm either totally insane or dead. And that's what you're really capturing, I think, is because you're right. You can't create a true sense of shock or horror or anything like that. You can make things creepy and get that real sense of, wow, that's really creepy kind of thing. But still, the player is always going to be disconnected from their character in that,
yeah.
you're not going to
It's that
control how the player
emotional,
feels.
yeah, it's that emotional buy-in to the game that would seem to make a horror game worth it.
Right.
You get that payoff, but I don't know what the mechanism is that creates that buy-in. Particularly when the chances are your character's not going to survive.
Yeah, I mean, you're never going to quite get that because there's unless you're dealing with players who are struggling with the separation of reality from fiction. To be honest with you, you're never going to get that total buy-in.
Hmm.
You know,
But
you're,
these games are incredibly popular, so something's got to be going on. I just can't figure out what it is.
they enjoy the escapism of it.
Hmm.
I mean, otherwise, how does escapism work? That's basically what you're asking, is like, how does escapism work? How do people actually are able to set aside the real world, and just for a couple of hours, just immerse themselves into a game? They don't forget at any point that they're playing a game. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So the fears are
Well,
never real.
right.
Um,
If you're playing like a traditional Dungeons and Dragons game, there are tactical players that play it as if they're playing a board. They're playing a
mhm,
board game in a sense, and so they get immersed in either the character building or the tactics of a combat. Um, that's their buy-in, not necessarily story. My feeling about horror games is you gotta have an emotional buy-in to the narrative story that's going on, and that just I just don't know. Maybe it's a GM skill thing. I just don't know. You can light all the candles in the world and put out your Halloween pumpkins and whatnot, but I'm not sure how you actually get that buy-in
I
other
don't
than
think you're going to
characters
get
just
that level of
surrender.
buy-in. Yeah, I don't think you will, again, unless you're dealing with players that are disconnected from reality. You know, but the in a D&D game, All right. The creepiest thing I ever did, and my players told me, they were like, "Oh man, I was really creeped out when you introduced this." Was I made a group of 3 zombie children. They were like toddlers that were zombies, and that creeped the shit out of them. They were like, "Oh, that's like really freaking crazy," you know. And I did a whole thing with a bunch of zombies. So there were zombies with like a missing arm, and or one missing leg. One zombie, her face was still beautiful, yet the rest of her body was all decrepit and everything. So it was just the differences in their appearances, and the way that they behaved and everything like that, that was to them creepy. And these are adult players, and they're like, wow, that was like, just in my description of them and just in the way that I had them behaving and such. um I was able to create that creepiness about them. But were they genuinely so bought into it that they were fearful? No. It was like, in the
Well,
end, they knew these are zombies. These are something that we can, hopefully
yeah, but it
turn
seems to me
or
like something like that really lends itself to LARPing, where I don't necessarily understand LARPing the way people that LARP understand LARPing, but the sort of buy-in that you would get at a Halloween game where you're playing a horror game, and you had all the props, and you know at a convention, dark rooms and black lights and God knows what. Um, I can understand the emotional buy-in of that,
yeah,
but sitting around, adults sitting around a table that have like real world jobs
yeah.
and families, I mean, yeah, maybe
But
I don't know.
the closest thing I ever came to LARPing was playing paintball with a bunch of guys from my unit, which was the military police unit, along with a couple of Marines and a couple of special forces, people that we would kind of collectively kind of knew from the various units that were in and around my general area, and we went to go play paintball, and it was a thing that was like 5,000 players,
Oh my
2,500 per
God.
side. They actually had it was 50 or more acres of land. I forget exactly how, but they actually had a helicopter that they were using during this thing. And you had a rule that you couldn't shoot at the helicopter, but the helicopter would throw paintball grenades down at different things. And we went into this thing and just organized ourselves, and it was like 6 or 8 hours of brutal just combat. And all of us had we had our guns cranked up to the maximum, inches per whatever, the velocity of the rounds,
Feet per
feet per
second.
second, feet per second. And to the point that the paintballs would actually give you welts, even through winter weight BDUs. And one of our members, it was a Marine, I'll never forget. He got hit right in the chin, and it split his lip open to where you could see his teeth through his split lower lip. And he was like, just blood pouring out of this thing, and he was laughing. He was having a ball. We're like, this is just like, and that's the closest to LARPing that I have ever come to. It was the closest to just playing a game with the same, nearly the same intensity. Again, not like what we did in real combat, obviously, um, but we were definitely far more serious about it than anybody else on the field.
Would,
And
would, would you describe it as sort of that feeling that you get from athletic competition?
oh yeah, with true, like, full contact athletic competition, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's how we were playing it. I mean, we were playing it like, we were getting injured playing it. It was like, every time we got hit, it was for real. We were playing it like we would have in a real situation. Like I realized, like we had to wear armbands. So at one point, I decided I was going to run far ahead of our group and then turn around and face the opposite direction with my armband hidden between me and the tree, so that when the opposing force went past me, and then I just opened up and just popped a whole bunch of them, and then ran back to my group, and just messing around and doing those kinds of things, and just using different tactics that some of the others probably weren't. Not we certainly, our group couldn't have been the only veterans or military personnel, because we were all still active at the time too. But we were probably the only group that had about 16 or 16 or 18, I forget the exact number, that were working as a unit, and all of us were military. So it was again, it was LARPing in the sense of, we were playing the game, but we were playing the game at a different level. And maybe that's what you're talking about. It's like when you're that engaged in a tabletop role-playing game, you're playing it at a different level. And maybe that's what 4D, is like, when the players are acting completely in character, and they don't allow for any out of character play at the table. That I think is getting to the level of immersion that you're talking about. And I've heard, like, people, like, again, I don't know if you knew who Shauner was.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I
but
think everybody knows who
Shauner actually said that if you break out of character, he's kicking you off his table. Now, I don't know what if he even had a table. You know what I'm saying? So,
Right.
I'm not sure that was even a thing, but I can see that is the level of what he at least believed was necessary to actually role play.
Well, that would exclude like tactical players. So I'm not sure I'm not sure I'm on board with that, just because there are people that are really into the tactical side of a game, and that's cool, man. And there are other people that are really into the role playing side of the game, and
Yeah. Now,
that's
what if
okay.
you're
That's okay too.
role playing tactical PCs?
Yeah,
So what if you're playing Twilight 2000?
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's where you run into that issue, right? Of what is you know, have you crossed some line? Are you doing a hybrid? Are you still not immersive because you are tactical, or is that tactical play truly role playing in that instance? And it depends on it depends on what you consider to be in character role play.
Well, yeah, and it's also choices within the group, because you can have, one guy that's totally role playing that says, give me that bazooka. It's the last round. I don't care. I'm scared. I'm going to kill this thing. And then you have a tactical player saying, oh, no, don't use that. We need to save
Yeah.
that for, yeah. So, I mean, there's conflict built in, within the system to accommodate both those playing styles, which is cool. That one genre or one gaming system can satisfy two different groups. It's just there's friction between the two, and neither of them are really right or wrong, in my opinion.
I'm just checking out some of the comments. But my first brand D&D module I've ran were B1 and B2. Started in 5e but never ran it. Was more interested in BX. Yeah, and Yeah, it's to me, Kentucky, it's probably BX is probably one of the best versions of D&D to begin with, anyway. Um, and I think, and I used to argue this all the time, and Sean used to disagree with me all the time too. I was like, I think D&D Beck Me is the best version of Dungeons and Dragons, and probably the best, in my opinion, the best tabletop role playing game to introduce no players to tabletop role playing games. I just think it's ideally set up to teach new players, how to play these games, and I think it does um, really does lend itself to actual role playing. Because the system is so simple, because it gives the players just a very a very moderated amount of information going forward. You're only dealing with levels 1, 2, 3. Then you're doing, I believe it's 4 to 9 for the next one. But that 1 to 3 is just ideal, so that the players can't look forward to see, well, what am I going to do when I'm 5th level? Nope, that's not even in the book. You don't even have to worry about that right now. You're going to focus on just getting through levels 1 through 3. And that I really do appreciate for the purposes of a training tool. And because one of the worst things I think you can do is let players think about what their characters are doing when they're 10th level, and they're 1st level. You know what I'm saying? It's like having a backstory that is so far beyond what a 1st level character should be focusing on. I think that B1, as Kentucky Rec says, and that's how I started my AD&D first edition group too. Was with B1. They did B1. They did B2. Now, obviously, they're not running it like the adventures were truly written. It was tailored to what they were doing with it, and what the campaign eventually evolved into. Um, but their actions in B1 is what really evolved the entire 2+ year campaign into, just from how that group of players interacted during those first 12 to 16 sessions.
Do you
And
think that these old modules and sort of this older style of play, one of the secrets to it is that it was more intimate?
Mhm.
I don't, that doesn't get discussed a lot. That's sort of my feeling, is that, these, it's more sterilized or heroic. I don't know what it is now, but some of these older, they've got real character to some of these older modules.
Yeah, and there were the older modules were they were certainly deadlier. You can run into, with B2. I mean, B2, you're potentially a 1st level character, maybe 2nd level if you've done B1 as well. And B2, you could run into a Medusa, you could run into a Minotaur, you can run into a number of creatures that could easily wipe out a group of 5 1st or 2nd level characters. And yet that's how it was designed to be, like something. There was even a white in B2. So you can run into something that can level drain you to 0. In just one hit. So yeah, B1 and B2 were very challenging adventures as well, and ones that were designed for you to do them very piecemeal, to keep on going into them, coming back out again, healing up, training up, doing whatever, going back into it, coming back out again. So never meant to go, boom, 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 all the way through the entire thing without any real break away from it. And that's why they're so replayable too, because I've like I said in B1, I think we spent like 16 3 to 4 hour sessions just doing B1. So really, really long time that the players spent with that particular module. Now, obviously, again, I added a lot to it that wasn't there just to make it different, but and to make it more aligned with what the campaign was developing to become. But but that was the nature of those older game systems. My only contact with new game adventures is like the ones that came in the starter box sets of 5e, which were actually pretty good adventures, although I didn't like the one in the D&D Essentials kit. It was too much of a you're level 6 by the time this thing is done, with very little in between to actually get that high level. Let's see. So big strength was that the rules were simple enough for children to run. I'm a believer that a game should be simple enough for children to run. Yeah, but and the other thing is, and I don't mean this as a real slam to millennials or Generation X, whatever they're called now, Generation Z, Zoomers. There was a definite difference in the young teenagers of the 70s and 80s and young teenagers today. There was, I think that in general we were far more again, I'm trying to be somewhat diplomatic about this. We were far more mature. We were, far more on our own. Some will say jokingly, Generation X were feral kids. We were thrown outside and, defend for ourselves throughout most of the day. And then, we only came back in before nightfall, kind of thing. But when we played these games, we played these games a lot more seriously, if that makes any sense. And we, we were tacticians a lot, a lot of times, and I didn't come from a wargaming background. My background, my introduction to D&D was D&D. It wasn't from wargaming, so I didn't have that background in me, and we were methodical when we went through a dungeon. We were searching every 10 feet. We were mapping the place out, by hand as we were going through it. We were doing all these things. We were keeping track of our ammo and our, how many caltrops we had, and, always had that 10-foot pole. We were just moving forward, through it, in a very tactical way, to use your terminology, need more cowbell. We were, I just think that we approached it not looking at it as, oh, this is a social thing where we're going to chit chat and have fun. We had a genuine, understanding that our characters could die at any given moment. And we went through a lot of character deaths in those first couple of years that we were playing D&D. And we were kids that were 11 and 12 years old when we first started.
Do you think the Gygax and the creators around TSR, late 70s, early 80s, had to have either some experience in Vietnam or known people who had experience in Vietnam? Do you think that sort of shaped the culture of early Dungeons and Dragons, where, tactically, it sort of played more tactically rather than getting into sort of the social side of it.
Well, I think that well, Gary, I think was too old for Vietnam, to be honest with you. Um, and from my he was not a veteran. From my understanding, I don't think any of those game designers were, because I think that they were already in their, in the 70s. They're already in their 30s, or even older than that. So they were, I don't think that they were teenagers in the early 70s. Um, they were adults in the early 70s. So they would have been teenagers in the, you probably have more Korean War veterans amongst the early war gamers back then than you would Vietnam. Just my, my impression of it. I don't think any of them were. I think that they certainly were drawing from wargaming, and wargaming is much more. I mean, they weren't necessarily thinking about characters in that sense either. So they were used to their units getting wiped out. You know, um,
Yeah,
it was.
you would think there would be more realism drawn into the game. Real risk, characters, real risk of character death. Um,
Logistical realism.
yeah,
Yeah, logistical realism. Yeah, absolutely. And
because
real time as well.
because there's
Yeah.
not really that much of a difference between a squad out in the field
Hmm.
and an adventuring party. It plays very similar, I would think, um, as far as logistics and
Yeah, well,
planning
it's,
and
it's part of the reason why, people like Shauna, used to say that D&D was nothing but a war game, a board game and a war game, and not really a role-playing game. I think he kind of missed the point of what Dave Arneson had introduced to it, and that's where you're taking over the role of a single character, on the thing, and you're still logistically controlling the war game, but you as a character have a certain role and certain tasks that you're looking to do outside of just controlling what the units are doing. So it was very much like a domain play kind of thing as well, going on there. I don't think it takes on true role playing the way that you and I are probably talking about what role playing is until D&D BX. Once you get to Beckme, and or maybe even the Holmes edition might have been that first real break between OD&D and D&D BX. So Gary worked for Avalon. Yeah, I mean they were all war gamers. That's not a surprise to me. That was their true roots. So let's start. Let's see. We're approaching 2 hours. And I usually like to keep these around 2 hours. So let's get back to um, the idea. So why is the OSR seemingly not controversial or not controversy prone, let's say. And I think it's because, like, the discussion we're having here, right? We're talking about, how are we engaging in the game? And we're not talking about, how we should be, or what is the right way to play, or, you know, what is the best way to market this or do whatever. We're just talking about playing or running game systems. And I think that's why we don't have very much controversy, because the game systems aren't generating the controversy. The games publishers aren't really generating the controversy. The only time that I think the OSR and independent games are ensnared in controversy, let's say, is when, people outside of it are trying to make a controversial point about it that oftentimes is about personalities and not about game systems at all. So yeah, and within the OSR, I mean, like you said earlier, quibbling, and I call it that purposefully. It's quibbling over definitions, and like you said, two drunk uncles arguing is a great analogy of it. And is it really important? No, not necessarily. Although I still argue that the bigger the umbrella, the safer it is from external control and attacks and stuff like that. But I'll let you finish up the point.
No, I think we've covered it. It's just,
Yeah.
it's entertaining. It's
Mhm.
it's something that, to talk about, that shows like this and other shows.
Mhm.
It doesn't amount to anything. I mean, people are going to play the way they want to play.
Yes,
And
and they
every
should.
table is going to differ, and
Yeah.
every convention is going to differ. And
Mhm.
the only time that this sort of thing is going to come up is, you get some rule at a convention that says, you must offer safety tools,
Mhm.
or
Yes.
something that's, you know feels political or cultural,
Mhm.
or feels like Big Brother's going to tell me how to run my game. But man, you might
Yeah,
run into that
that's horrible.
once
And
in a while.
and the best way to address that is not to go to that convention. You
Yeah.
know, I would not run a game at a convention that told me how I have to run my table.
Yeah, I sort of bounce back and forth on that, because I can see where you've got some guy that's really going to press the envelope at a convention game, because there's really no accountability. He doesn't have to see these people again in a week or a month, so they're going to do something that's really explicit.
Yeah, I would
Um,
kick that person off the table.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
that's the
yeah, I
easy
don't
way
need
to
to
do
see
it. You try
somebody
it, you
do
get
that.
banned.
Yeah, I would just kick them off the table.
Yeah. But I
You
mean, that
know,
goes to DMs too. I mean, there's always a temptation that, when you've got basically open sign up and you don't know who these people are that are running games, that they're going to throw in something that's really aggressive. And
yeah,
I could see where, convention organizers are saying, hey, wait, we want to make this thing a little bit kid friendly, at least put a warning label on it. This is R rated, this is PG rated,
oh yeah,
something like
yeah. But
that. That heads up.
again, like if our player at a table and all of a sudden this person springs, something that I think is just inappropriate for that thing, um, I would just get up and walk away.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. I
I'll be
mean,
like, hey, this is not something I'm willing to, and it's not like I'm triggered by it. I'm just
right.
gonna think this is not the game that I was expecting, and I would get up and walk away.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the simple, common sense, non-controversial way of dealing with all these issues. But
Oh
again,
yeah, yeah,
but this is what people want to talk about, so
mm,
we talk about it.
yep. Okay, well, thanks a lot for coming on, and everyone, thanks a lot for participating. You know, um, Curious, thanks a lot for the donation of a membership. And as always, I look forward to talking to everybody on these live streams. I'm planning on doing these like every Thursday night, so we'll see what kind of a topic comes up for next Thursday night. And and as always, I've been running different game systems, and I've been posting things up on the daily. So if you have not subscribed to the channel, I am going to put that up here on the closing screen so you can see. And all you have to do is scan it, and you can join the channel, as a subscriber. Feel free to like and subscribe and to share. If you want to become a member, there are perks to being a member. And I try to keep that membership kind of cheap as well. So, not, and I don't really push it very, very much unless you want to play my games. That's the fastest way to get in on any of my games as well. Join my Discord server so that you can join as a player on there, not just as members, and get in on any of the games that are going on there as well. And you all have a great one. Hey, Steve, I am just wrapping it up. Sorry about that, but good to see you again, Steve. But yeah, I'm at the 2 hour mark, and that's usually where I look to cut these off at. So, Nemar Cowbell, thank you so much for popping in, and really
Been a
enjoyed our
pleasure. Cheers.
conversation. And good to see that we can agree on 90% and still disagree on the other 10%. And even then, I don't even think it was even 10%, but we can still, at least as adults, sit down and talk and talk about these things and have slightly different views on it, and still walk away encouraged to talk once again. So everyone else, have a great one, and I will go to that end screen and let's wrap this up. I got to take myself off. This is the one thing that's a little bit weird.